Next, an editorial reflecting the views of the United States government.
U.S. State Department officials testifying before a U.S. congressional committee say Venezuela is not cooperating fully in the fight against terrorism.
The Venezuelan challenged. Next on the line.
I'm concerned about the Venezuelan people, and I'm worried about the diminution of democratic institutions as well as nationalization efforts that may or may not be taken.
Chavez is going to fail unless he establishes a dictatorship, and he is headed in that direction. He's headed both in the direction of economic failure and dictatorship.
U.S. Secretary of State Rice said that Venezuela is a challenge to democracy in our own hemisphere.
And so I'm concerned about undermining of democratic institutions. And we're working hard to help prevent that from happening and strengthening democratic institutions.
Is the Hugo Chavez government a threat to democracy in Latin America? And does the U.S. have a strategy for confronting the challenge posed by Venezuela?
Since 1998, when Chavez was elected, support for the elected government has been rising very fast. It's now by far the highest in Latin America. He's won several elections, recognized to be free and fair, has won numerous referenda, but he is a dictator, a tin-pot dictator. It's proven by the fact that our dear leader said so. And since we are voluntary North Koreans, when the dear leader says it, it's true. So therefore, he's a dictator, and if you carry out subversion to overthrow him, that's pro-democracy by definition. You have to look hard to find an exception to this, or even a comment on it. I mean, we know that the U.S. did support a military coup, which briefly overthrew President Chavez, and the U.S. had to back down when he was restored quickly, and also had to back down in the face of a very angry reaction in Latin America. Almost all of Latin America, there was a big, very angry reaction. They take democracy there more seriously than we do here. Right after trying to overthrow the government by force, the U.S. immediately turned to subversion, supporting anti-Chavez groups. That's described in the press. The way it's described is the U.S. is supporting pro-democracy groups which are opposed to President Chavez. We might ask ourselves how we would react if Iran, say, had just supported a military coup that overthrew the government in the United States, and when they had to back off from that, immediately turned to supporting pro-democracy groups in the United States that are opposed to the government. Would we give them ice cream and candy or what? Well, in dictatorial Venezuela, they let them keep functioning.
George Bush uses the word democracy every other sentence when he speaks. But what does he mean by that? I think the last thing he has in mind is reducing the gap between the very wealthy and the very poor. One thing they do have in mind is that a country should be very hospitable to American corporations, to multinationals. They should be willing partners in neo-globalization. That's very important in the minds of American leaders. That's someone who's against such things can't be called a democracy.
Nuestro sistema electoral es de los más pulcros del mundo. Hemos ganado más de 10 elecciones, pero Chávez es un dictador. Se puede revocar el mandato del presidente, de los diputados, de los alcaldes, de los gobernadores, pero el sistema venezolano es una dictadura. Se está construyendo poder popular con participación de la gente a todos los niveles, que toma decisiones, participación en el presupuesto, en la ejecución de las obras, con Contraloría Social, pero esto es una dictadura. O sea, es la construcción mediática de una realidad, ¿verdad?, a partir de lo que desean quienes construyen esa realidad, que no es más que tomar control del petróleo venezolano.
So, a country, a third world country, any other country, which one, welcomes U.S. military bases, and two, welcomes the multinational corporations, that country is almost all the way to qualifying as a democracy in the minds of Bush and Cheney and other American leaders. And yet, look at Saudi Arabia as one example. They welcome American military bases, and that's enough to make them a democracy, even though they're a dictatorship. You know, everyone knows that.
La democracia traicionada en nombre de la democracia. Por citarte un par de ejemplos latinoamericanos, en 1932 hubo elecciones en El Salvador. Ganó el Partido Comunista. Y entonces, en nombre de la democracia, el general Hernández Martínez, desde el poder, instauró una dictadura sangrienta, hubo una carnicería de miles y miles de campesinos sacrificados en nombre de la democracia, porque habían votado mal. Esto años después también se vio en Chile, cuando Kissinger advirtió que Chile no podía volverse comunista por la irresponsabilidad de su propio pueblo, que había votado mal. Y entonces ocurrió lo que ocurrió a partir de Pinochet y su golpe motorizado desde afuera.
9/11, 1973, the CIA, ITT, Kennecott Copper, and a couple of other major U.S. corporate concerns, along with special units from the U.S. military, arranged a coup d'etat against the duly elected government of Salvador Allende, resulting in his death and the installation of Pinochet, who, as you may recall, was under formal charges of genocide at the time of his death. All right? Again, nothing to do with concern for spreading democracy or even sustaining democracy, quite the opposite, eradication of democracy, deterring democracy, as Noam Chomsky put it.
Esta idea de que la democracia solo vale en la medida en que se parece a lo que sus dueños deciden que es una idea enemiga de la democracia.